Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello, and welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the show that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm Marilyn Baker, and today we're going to hear from a new and exciting author of fiction, Alex Banwell. Alex writes stories that explore themes of identity, resilience, and discovering strength in unexpected places. As someone who is blind myself, I know how easy it is for society to underestimate what we're capable of. Often, assumptions are made before we've even had the opportunity to demonstrate our gifts, and that shapes how we see ourselves, unless we hold on to a stronger truth about who we are. Author Alex Banwell explores many of these themes in her books, Just Benny and Releasing Janet. Blind from birth, Alex has lived with the reality of navigating a sighted world that doesn't always understand blindness. Her fiction reflects questions of belonging, wholeness, and the courage to step into things you might once have thought were beyond your reach. Her story gently challenges the idea that disability defines a person's limits. Alex recently sat down to speak with producer Lynn Davies about her life, her writing, and the experiences that have shaped her. Here's their conversation.
For listeners who might not be familiar with you and it's meeting you for the first time, can you tell us something about yourself and your early life as a blind child?
Yeah, so I was born blind and I do have a tiny bit of sight in one eye, but I'm legally classed as being blind. And I grew up in a very loving family. People might be able to tell from my accent that I'm Welsh, so I grew up in Wales in a really loving, close family. My mother was a Christian. My dad wasn't a Christian. He didn't actually give his heart to the Lord until a couple of months before he died. We were so grateful for that. We prayed for that for a long, long time. But then because I grew up in the 80s and 80s, early to mid 90s, back in those days, they didn't integrate blind children into mainstream schools like they do now. So I had to go off to a boarding school when I was 11, which I absolutely hated. And so, yeah, that was a really traumatic time in my life. And I was so glad I took Jesus into that with me, because I don't think I would have coped if I hadn't been for him. So
yeah, I can imagine. It's quite scary, isn't it?
It is.
Because it's quite romanticized in fiction, but probably it's not quite like that. It's not quite Mary
it's not like
in real life. No. So you, as you mentioned, grew up in a Christian home and your mom was a Christian. How has your relationship with God changed and matured as you've got older?
I think as a child, you, like the Bible talks about childlike faith, you have that simple belief, bit like the belief you have that what your mum and dad say is right and they're your parents and they know best. But I think as you get older, you have to get to a place where the faith in Jesus becomes personal, like not that you believe because your parents believe and because you've been told all your life that this is true. Or in my case, just my mother, because my dad didn't. But, you have to come to a place where you believe because of your own experiences. You have to have your own experiences with Jesus to come to a place where you know that he's real and that everything you've been told all your life is true. And I think that really happened for me at boarding school, because suddenly I didn't have my mum and dad to rely on anymore. It was, and the school I was in, it wasn't a great environment, so there weren't people I could rely on. I felt very lonely at times. And that was when my faith really came into play, because my mother used to say to me on the phone, don't forget, you can always talk to Jesus. You can pray about everything and he's listening and he's there when we're not. And I can remember I went home every weekend. My parents would pick me up on a Friday and take me back on a Sunday. And I can remember when the weather was really bad. So when we had snow or heavy rain, begging the Lord, please don't let me have to stay here in this horrible place all weekend. And every time he answered that prayer, and my parents never missed a weekend. And that really showed me that he actually really did care about me and he was real. And my faith grew from there, really.
Right. So you really had that sort of personal bond that made your faith stronger.
Yeah. And then on into my teenage years, because I eventually I did come home from the boarding school and I did attend mainstream education, did my GCSEs and A levels in a mainstream school. But then I started having panic attacks. I started suffering badly from panic attacks. And then again, although I did have some medical help, it was mainly my faith that got me through. It was just leaning on the Lord and giving all that panic over to Him and, just literally crying out, help me, because there were days when I just felt so useless and so, overwhelmed by it all. And again, it was Him who brought me through. So yeah, it did become very personal.
Your faith has obviously also sort of inspired many parts of your life. You mentioned that you've always been into writing. When did you realize that it wasn't just a childhood passion, but something that was more like a calling that you did return to later?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I did write as a child, I loved stories. I've got this overactive imagination, which is sometimes a blessing and sometimes not. Um, but when I got married and I started getting more involved in church life, I stopped writing because I always wrote fiction. And I thought because I was a Christian and because I was involved in the church, that I should do serious things, very serious things. And like I started teaching Bible studies, I started preaching, and writing devotionals, and I started really channeling my writing energy into that. Although it was good and I enjoyed it, I can't say I didn't enjoy it, but it wasn't quite giving me life in the same way that fiction writing had always done. I felt like there was something missing. And finally, when lockdown happened and we were all forced to sit still, and not be running around during COVID, because we finally just had to sit still and think. And I think it did us all good, really, in some ways. And I was sitting out on my garden swing one day, which is where I do most of my thinking and praying and now my writing. And I sort of thought, I'm missing that fiction. I'm missing using that imagination God gave me. And the Lord began to show me, actually, that imagination isn't something I want you to put away like a childish toy. It's a gift. It's a gift I gave you, and you're not using that gift. And I began to think, well, okay, Lord, how can I use that gift? And I started experimenting a bit with just some fun writing, to see if I could still do it.
Yeah.
Because it's like getting back on a bike, you got, can I still ride this thing?
Exactly, kind of flexing the muscle a bit.
Yeah. And then I began to realize, well, yeah, you can. You need a bit of practice. You need to do a bit of work on it. But I realized, yeah, this is a gift God gave me, and He wants me to use it. And so I did.
So you didn't set out to write a Christian book, but you say that faith sort of found its way onto the page. Were there any times where the writing process surprised you, where the story seemed to kind of take over and was leading you rather than you leading it?
When I started, I had a basic story in my head of what I wanted to do. And I thought that's what I was going to write. And that's what I started. And, obviously knew what my beginning point was, knew where I was going. Well, I thought I knew where I was going in the end. And then I remember getting to, I don't want to spoil the story for anyone because it's really hard with fiction because you don't want to give it away. But the character I was writing about, Benny, he's epileptic. And I remember getting to a chapter where he was in the park with a friend and another boy and a boy who really didn't like him. And I knew that he was going to have a seizure, a very severe epileptic seizure in that scene. And one of the boys who was present in that scene was a Christian, and I'd written him in as a Christian, not really planning to do anything with it at that point. And then suddenly I felt the Holy Spirit nudging me, going, you're missing something here. You could do something with that. He could pray. And I thought, oh, okay, he could pray. And then all of a sudden, from there, the story took a completely different turn. And it wasn't what I'd been planning. And there was a point later in the book where a whole scene, I felt like the Holy Spirit took over and started dictating stuff to me. And I thought, yeah, there's more to this. It's not just a little fiction book. There's actually something here. I'd always been a Bible teacher, and the Lord was saying to me, you can still teach, just in a different way.
When you plan something and it all of a sudden takes a different turn, was that something that you grappled with at all, or did you just kind of follow it?
It felt so peaceful at the time. Because I wasn't planning to publish the book at that point, I had no idea of publication in my mind. I wasn't writing for publication. I was just writing to see what would happen. And so I was just going along at the time peacefully, really enjoying the feeling that the Lord was still with me in this, that I wasn't just going off on one doing my own thing, and that he could bless this, you know. That was different when I got to the second book, because then I knew I was writing Christian fiction. It was a little bit more of a pressure situation then, because then I knew what God wanted me to do. And so there was more of a pressure, like, Lord, I hope I can get this right again. Please help me get this right again. So then it became weighty. And then I began to put pressure on myself, and I still do, because I'm one of these people who puts a lot of pressure on myself and wants to please the Lord so badly that sometimes it becomes a noose around my neck, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand. Because it's like you are stepping up to the challenge now, like it's with you now from the beginning, whilst the first time it sort of came in as more of like it was a seasoning that was sprinkled on, but now it was all in the baking, so to speak, to use a very food-based analogy.
Yeah, and people had read the first book and enjoyed it, and so now there was that pressure as well, like, oh my goodness, can I do this again? You know?
Absolutely. So you explore themes of disability and self-worth and truth in a very sensitive way through your books. What was important to you when you created the characters of Benny and Janet?
I wanted to make the characters believable. That was the main thing, because sometimes in fiction you can have very what's the word I'm looking for? Characters that are either all good or all bad, or they become perfect at the end of the story, you know. And human beings, we're not like that. You know, we've all got our good points, our bad points. We've all got our struggles, whether we're disabled, whether we're not. In Janet's case, she isn't disabled. She's Benny's mum, but she carries a weight from the past. She carries a secret, and that is weighing her down, and it's kind of changed the way that she views the world and the way that she looks after her son. And so I really wanted to just make the characters relatable, and I wanted to show that even when we've got the Lord in our lives, life still isn't always a bed of roses. We still have problems. We still have to face our challenges. I didn't want to do the the story of, oh, you know, somebody, because like I said, Benny's epileptic. I didn't want to do the story of somebody prays over him and he gets healed. And I know that happens. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I wanted to show how we can learn to live with our disabilities. I mean, I've been blind all my life, which is now 45 years. And the Lord's really, really taught me so much, even through living with my disability. And I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing. There are times when I wish I could see, but there are also times when I'm thankful for the lessons the Lord teaches me. And, you know, so I wanted to show that in my writing. I wanted to say that it's not always bad, that the Lord can bring good out of all of these things.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And also the way that other perspectives become valid. You know, we've had so many writers come in writing about their native cultures, for example, and it's definitely the time to also offer perspectives from other points of view, such as disability, because the world isn't that simple. You don't get healed just because someone pray for you necessarily. And there was one quote that I read, and I can't remember who said it, but it says that the news tells you what's going on, but the fiction tells the truth. And having the truth in all its forms out there from people through the eyes of different people is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's a really good quote. Yeah. And also with faith, I mean, I think fiction is brilliant because you can read the Bible or you can read Christian teaching books and they can tell you how to live. But when you read Christian fiction, it shows you how that can be put into practice. Like, how do I live with pain? How do I live with grief? And I think that's where fiction is really helpful because it shows the difficulties, it shows the positives, it shows the traps we can fall into because we all do, we all make mistakes, and it shows us possible ways out. And I think it makes us think. When I read Christian fiction, it makes me think, which I like.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're working now on the third book in the series. Can you tell us a little bit more at this stage what that will be about? And also, I'd be really interested to know you talked about this a little bit already, but what is it that you would like people to take away from your stories?
Okay, what's the third book about? Well, that's a funny one because once again, I thought I knew what the third book was going to be about. I thought I had it all in my head. And I started writing it and I just felt this little check in my spirit going, no, not this way. This isn't the way I want you to go. So I had to go and pray and go, oh Lord, what are we doing now? And the third book, when people read books 1 and 2, people keep saying to me, we want more of Ola. Ola is Benny's father. He's a very strange character and people seem to be fascinated by him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite get why, but okay, that's what people want. So I have sort of kowtowed, and the Lord has showed me that yes, there is a story I can write which does include Ola quite heavily. So I have to weave him into what was going to be my original third story and possibly then create a fourth from that. But yeah, I think the third book, because what I'm really trying to show, because I'm following this one character, Benny is my main character in the whole series, even though there are other characters. Started off with him as a newborn baby when his mum and dad discovered he was epileptic. Where I am now, he's 17. And what I really want to show is how, once you've given your heart to the Lord, how do you live that? How do you grow in your faith? And how does your faith then impact those around you? So like with him, his parents, his friends, his girlfriend, how does that all, spread out into other people's lives? And so when you say like what is your aim in the series, I think for me it's to show how you live. How do we live as Christians in this world that's full of pressures, that's full of stress, that's full of negativity, that's full of people who might say, "Oh, you're rubbish. You're no good." As blind people, sometimes we really feel our limitations, or sometimes people look at our limitations and they misread them. They think we can't do things that we can do.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And or they just misunderstand blindness. And although I didn't write about blindness, I wrote about epilepsy. In that sense, it can be a bit similar because, like, yes, Benny has difficulties because of his epilepsy. He struggles with some basic learning, but there are lots of things he can do. And the series starts out with a little boy who thinks he's rubbish, he can't do anything. And as the series progresses, I'm trying to show that yes, he can. And with Jesus's help, he can do even more than he thinks is possible. So that's kind of my aim, I think, with the whole series, I hope.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. It was wonderful chatting to you, and I'll be looking forward to the third installment in the series.
Thank you.
Alex Banwell's books, Just Benny and Releasing Janet, are available through the Torch Library and eShop in Braille, giant print and audio. Just contact Client Services if you'd like a copy. And if you're someone who uses a Braille display to read your books, like me, don't forget that we also have a Braille SD card available. It costs £10 and contains our full collection of titles, making it an easy and convenient way to access a wide range of Christian resources. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. But before we go, we at Torch Trust want to say thank you to Lydia and Becky, who are running in the Bristol Half Marathon next weekend. They're running on behalf of the Torch Trust, and we're incredibly grateful to them for their efforts. If you want to support them, head over to justgiving.com and search for Torch Trust. We'll catch up with them in a couple of weeks to find out how they got on. If you'd like to hear more about the Braille SD card or how Torch can support you in other ways, don't hesitate to get in touch. The number is 01858 438 260. Again, that's 01858 438 260. Or you can email info@torchtrust.org. We're also on social media. Just look for Torch Trust on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube. Well, we'll be back next week. But until then, from me, Marilyn and the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.